She actually called the police on me during my coffee break. 3 squad cars, guns drawn, surrounded my family's cabin, all because of an HOA. The culprit was Victoria Sterling, self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, who called 911 to report that my humble 60-year-old cabin was a threat to property values. She even live-streamed the whole drama, yelling to thousands of viewers that I was destroying her precious $3 million community. The police checked my documents and left without incident, but Victoria had much bigger plans in mind. If you've ever clashed with a power-hungry hoe, let me know where you're tuning in from, because this woman had no idea she was dealing with the actual owner of the entire valley, including her own house. Let me take you back a bit. It was a perfect Saturday morning in Pine Ridge, Colorado. The sun peeked over the mountains, birds chirped, and I was savoring the quiet at my family's cabin, a place that had been in our family since 1962. The cabin was nothing fancy, a modest wooden structure that my grandfather had built with his own hands. But to me, it was everything. After my parents died in a car crash when I was 25, I inherited this place, my escape from the chaos of running 12 restaurants across Colorado. I always thought the cabin sat on just a small patch of family land, surrounded by the vast Pine Ridge Valley. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of an expensive car struggling along the dirt road. A white Range Rover emerged, driven by none other than Victoria Sterling, president of the Sterling Heights HOA. She stepped out, armed with a measuring tape, clipboard, and what I can only describe as her battle pearls. Flanking her were 2 other HOA board members, looking like they were about to arrest me for war crimes. Victoria marched right up to my porch, her designer heels sinking into the soft dirt. "Excuse me," she barked, waving her clipboard like a sword. "This eyesore of a cabin is in violation of 23 HOA regulations, including a but not limited to a paint color, architectural style, and grass height." I nearly spilled my coffee. "Ma'am," I said, "this cabin's been here since 1962, long before Sterling Heights was even a thought. And more importantly, it's not part of your HOA." Her face turned an interesting shade of purple. "Everything within 10 miles of Sterling Heights is under our community standards," she insisted. Victoria was infamous for calling the police at least 10 times a month. Last week, it was over someone's grass being too tall. The week before, a dog barked twice after 8 p.m. My elderly neighbor Harold Crawford liked to joke that Victoria probably had 911 on speed dial and got Christmas cards from the dispatch center. "Mrs. Sterling," I said, trying to stay calm, "the police aren't your personal architectural review board. This cabin is perfectly legal." But she was already dialing 911 again, her voice shrill as she claimed I was an armed trespasser threatening her safety. Minutes later, sirens echoed through the trees. Not 1, not 2, but 3 police cars arrived. Officers leapt out with their hands on their weapons, and Victoria launched into her performance. "Officers, thank God you're here. This man is illegally occupying land and threatened me," she declared, still live-streaming to thousands. "Watch justice in action," she crowed. A weary-looking officer who clearly knew Victoria well approached me, cautious but polite. "Sir, we need to see some identification and property documentation," he said. I went inside and calmly retrieved the deed and all the paperwork while Victoria narrated to her followers about how vagrant squatters were ruining the neighborhood. I handed everything over to the officer. His eyebrows shot up. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Victoria, "this cabin is completely legal. It's been here for decades and isn't part of the HOA." Victoria's face went from purple to red to bone white in seconds. "That's impossible. The HOA has authority over everything within 10 miles. I'll sue. I'll have this shack torn down." The police tried to explain the law to her as she shook with rage. "Mrs. Sterling," I said quietly, "you might want to check the Pine Ridge land records before you do something you can't undo." She spun on me, pearls swinging dangerously. "Is that a threat?" she shrieked. The officer stepped between us. "Ma'am, the only threats today came from you. We're leaving, and I suggest you do the same." As the police cars drove off, Victoria stood there trembling with fury. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll use every legal trick to destroy this eyesore. You'll be bankrupt before I'm done." She stomped back to her Range Rover, but not before Emma Brooks, who lived in Sterling Heights and served on the HOA board, caught up with me. She looked around nervously, then whispered, "I work with Victoria. She's hiding something serious. Meet me at the coffee shop tomorrow." She even said something about making sure you're gone before the cabin is demolished. On Monday morning, a certified letter arrived listing 30 HOA violations for my cabin, everything from the paint color being too dark to window angles not meeting some arcane standard. Then came another letter from Richard Sterling, Victoria's lawyer husband, threatening a $300,000 lawsuit for causing emotional distress to his wife. I was stunned by the audacity, but it was about to get even worse. Victoria posted in the Sterling Heights social media group of 15,000 members accusing me of being a criminal hiding from the law. The rumor spread fast, and suddenly, my neighbors at the restaurant started looking at me strangely. That's when I decided to meet with my lawyer, Elena Rodriguez. She specialized in real estate law and had her own run-ins with HOA bullies in the past. "Marcus," she said, scanning the papers, "this is blatant harassment, plain and simple, but there was more to this than just HOA harassment." Victoria Sterling had no legal basis for any of this nonsense. She was stretching her authority way beyond its limits. As we talked, Elena shared how she had nearly lost her own home to an overreaching HOA years ago. That explained her fierce commitment to fighting cases like mine. "Let me dig into the Pine Ridge land records," she said. "Something isn't adding up." While Elena worked the legal angle, I was stuck dealing with Victoria's intensifying campaign of intimidation. She actually organized a clean community march, 30 residents parading to my cabin with picket signs demanding the removal of what they called the eyesore to preserve property values. She whipped out a laser measuring tool, meticulously measuring every inch of my cabin, all while live streaming and claiming to find 47 building code violations. I stood there on my porch, sipping coffee, watching her. "Wow, Mrs. Sterling," I called out, unable to help myself. "Ever thought of taking up knitting? Much less stressful than measuring grass with a laser pointer." My sarcasm only made her angrier. The police were called to my cabin 3 more times that week, once for the smell of burning wood from my fireplace, and twice for suspicious noises that turned out to be me hammering a loose board back into place. Each time, the officers looked more and more exasperated with Victoria. One young cop even pulled me aside and said, "Between you and me, we've started calling these calls the Victoria Sterling Comedy Hour at the station." Still, the situation was becoming serious. Victoria wasn't just an annoying neighbor anymore. She had power, connections, and an unhealthy obsession with controlling everyone around her. Emma Brooks reached out to me in secret, asking to meet at a small coffee shop downtown. She looked tired, scared. "Marcus," she whispered, "there's something you need to know. Victoria and Richard have tripled our HOA fees over the last 2 years. It's killing us. I can barely afford my daughter Sophie's school supplies." She handed me her phone, showing me photos of documents she'd managed to sneak out. "But that's not the worst part," she said. "I think they're stealing millions of dollars." And Victoria broken bar, "She knows you're sitting on something valuable. She mentioned your grandfather's land in a board meeting. She said something about old property records." That night, I went through my grandfather's old files in the cabin, hoping to find answers. Among the papers was a letter from 1965. In it, he wrote about buying the Pine Ridge property for next to nothing, but he didn't say how much land was included. "One day, this will be worth a fortune," he wrote, "but I'm keeping the details safe until the time is right." I wondered what he meant. All this time, I'd thought the cabin sat on maybe an acre or 2, but his letter suggested there was much more. As I pondered it, my phone rang. It was Elena, and she sounded breathless. "Marcus, drop everything right now," she said. "I just found the original land records and contracts. Your cabin a broken bar. It isn't just on a small patch of land. Sterling Heights doesn't even own the land they're built on, and the real owner." I said the line went dead. I tried calling back, but got no answer. Then a text came through. "They're watching. Meet me at my office first thing tomorrow. Trust no one." What I found changes everything. My hands trembled as I locked the cabin door. Victoria had no idea what she'd set in motion, but I was starting to realize this wasn't just about my cabin anymore. The next morning, I met Elena at her office. She locked the door and pulled the blinds before laying out a massive stack of documents. "Marcus, you need to sit down," she said. "Your grandfather didn't just buy a little plot in 1965. He bought the entire Pine Ridge Valley, all 15,000 acres of it." My jaw dropped. "That's about 23 square miles," she went on. "Sterling Heights and 3 other subdivisions are built on land that was leased, not sold. The lease was signed in 1929 and runs out in 2028, just 18 months from now." The world spun around me. "You're telling me 2,500 people live on land my family owns?" I asked. Elena nodded solemnly. "Your grandfather was a smart man. He kept this secret because he knew how young you were when your parents died. He was worried you'd sell it cheap to pay off debts or get swindled by developers." "Marcus, your cabin isn't just a piece of land, it's sitting at the heart of an empire." My mind flashed back to all those days with my grandfather at the cabin, him teaching me about the land. The responsibility of stewardship. His words echoed in my head. "Land isn't just property, son, it's legacy, it's responsibility." Now I understood why he'd hidden the truth. He wasn't just shielding us, he was protecting me from making a terrible mistake while I was grieving. "But why didn't the lawyer tell me when I inherited everything?" I asked. Elena pulled out one final document. "Your grandfather set up a trust with strict conditions. The full truth would only be revealed if someone tried to force you off the land. He wanted you to be greedy, not just to inherit, but to protect it." "Smart man." I sat there in stunned silence. Silence hung heavy around me as I tried to comprehend it all. I wasn't just fighting for my cabin anymore. I was fighting for control of an entire valley worth billions. As I tried to make sense of the staggering revelation, Victoria doubled down on her attacks. She hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me, and they found exactly what she wanted: my 2008 bankruptcy filing after my parents died, the funeral expenses, the hospital bills, the legal fess. It had wiped me out before I'd built my restaurant business from scratch. Victoria turned this into a public spectacle. She posted a video called "Exposing Marcus Thompson, From Bankruptcy to Cabin Squatter," which racked up 80,000 views in just 2 days. The comments were vicious. People called me a parasite, a failure who would drag everyone else down. At community meetings, Victoria paraded my picture on a projector screen, painting me as a reckless outsider determined to ruin their lives. "This man," she would say, jabbing her finger at my face, "lost everything because he's a failure. Now he wants to bring us all down with him. We can't let that happen." 500 residents signed a petition titled "Ban Marcus Thompson from Civilized Areas." But Victoria didn't stop there. She reported me to 5 different government agencies, alleging I was everything from a drug trafficker to a tax cheat. She even called my restaurant suppliers, pretending to be a health inspector, warning them to reconsider doing business with someone under federal investigation. That week, 2 of my restaurants were hit with surprise health inspections, and no doubt triggered by her lies. It was wearing me down. One night, I sat in my dark cabin, staring at old family photos, the loss of my parents fresh in my mind all over again. For a fleeting moment, I thought about giving up. Maybe if I sold the cabin, it would all go away. But then I saw a photo of my grandfather, standing proud in front of the cabin he built with his own hands. Something inside me snapped back into place. I wasn't about to let Victoria Sterling destroy his legacy. Emma sent me an encrypted email that chilled me to the bone. "VR have embezzled $8 million. I have proof. I'm scared they'll find out. I used to help Victoria until I saw the truth in the books of 3 shell companies, fake Phase 2 development, and residents tricked into fee hikes at wine parties. I pretended to help her with photocopies and took pictures of everything. Be careful." She's desperate. The puzzle pieces were coming together fast. Victoria wasn't just a control freak, she was a criminal, desperate to protect her empire. Suddenly, her fixation on my cabin made perfect sense. If she could drive me off the land and claim it was abandoned, she might challenge the lease in court before it expired. That night, around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps on my porch. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the door to find Harold Crawford, my elderly neighbor, standing there holding a rusty metal box. "Marcus," he said, his voice trembling, "your grandfather gave me this 40 years ago. told me to hand it over when you really needed it. After what Victoria's been doing, I think it's time." His hand shook as he opened the box. Inside were old contracts, maps, and letters. "Your grandfather knew this day would come," Harold said. "He knew someone like Victoria would try to take what's yours." Among the papers was a hand-drawn map with Sterling Heights, built on borrowed time, scrawled across the top. There were old photos of the valley before it was developed, pristine and wild, my grandfather's dream. Harold's eyes grew distant. "Your grandfather was no fool. He saw how developers were tearing up Colorado and no respect for nature or community. So he bought up this valley and leased it out with ironclad conditions. When the lease expires, everything built here, every house, every structure goes back to the land's owner." I stared at the box of documents, my head spinning. "Why doesn't anyone know about this?" I asked. Harold sighed. "Because your grandfather made sure the original leaseholders signed strict NDAs. Most of the current homeowners are third or fourth owners who don't even know about the original lease. But Victoria and Richard do. They've been hunting for a way to break it before time runs out. That's why she's so obsessed with your cabin. If she can make it look like you abandoned it, she might be able to challenge the ownership in court." His eyes hardened. "I've been watching her, keeping records of everything she's done. I was a journalist for 40 years. I know how to build a case. Your grandfather saved my life once, pulled me from a car wreck. I promised him I'd protect his secret until you needed it." As Harold left, my phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Marcus, sit down. The lease contract says when it ends, everything reverts to you, not just the land, everything on it. 2,000 homes worth $6 billion. In 18 months, it's all yours." The next morning, Harold and Emma met me at a diner outside town. Emma's hand shook as she showed me photos of financial documents. "They've siphoned $8 million from the HOA over 5 years," she explained. "It's all been laundered through 3 fake companies. The 3 companies involve Ida Sterling Development Phase 2, Pine Ridge Improvements LLC, and Victoria's Landscaping Service. So weren't real, except on paper. The money funneled through them ended up in offshore accounts and in Richard's gambling ventures in Nevada." Harold, leaning on his experience from decades in journalism, had been tracking their schemes for 2 years. "They tricked 60% of the residents into signing off on outrageous fee hikes," he explained. "Victoria would host those wine and sign parties so she'd get them tipsy before slipping those documents under their noses. She especially targeted elderly folks and single parents, people too overwhelmed or too trusting to comb through the fine print." Mrs. Chen, who was 85, signed away an extra $1,000 every month, convinced it was for security improvements that never happened. Emma's voice cracked as she shared her story. "I supported Victoria at first. She promised she'd make the community better," she said. "But when my HOA fees jumped from $500 to $2,000 a month, I had to dig deeper. So for my 10-year-old I couldn't join the school science club because I couldn't afford the supplies. That's when I volunteered to help with the paperwork and found out everything. I pretended to be loyal, but all along, I was gathering evidence." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at me. "Marcus, she's ruined so many families. The Johnsons lost their home. The Patels had to pull their twins out of college. Also Victoria could keep her $5 million mansion and Richard could gamble it away in Vegas." She slid more documents across the table. "Look at this. They billed the HOA $50,000 for a fountain that only cost $5,000 to build. The contractor was Richard's cousin. He kicked back $40,000 to them." Harold leaned forward, still sharp at 78. "Here's the real kicker, Marcus. Victoria and Richard know about the lease expiration. They've been hoarding money, getting ready to challenge it in court. Their whole angle, they're going to argue that your family hasn't actively managed the land, so you've forfeited your rights. Your cabinet's the only thing proving your family still has a presence. If they can destroy it and chase you off, they think they'll win." The picture was finally coming together. This wasn't just a fight about some rundown cabin or neighborhood gossip. It was about billions of dollars in real estate that Victoria was trying to steal. And everything changed at 2 o'clock that morning when Victoria lost control completely. She found out Emma had been logging into the HOA financial system after Emma forgot to clear the browser history. In her rage, Victoria hired 6 men to attack my cabin. I woke to the sound of breaking glass and splintering wood. They trashed my grandfather's handmade furniture, spray-painted "Get Out or Die" on the walls, and worst of all, they burned the rocking chair he built for my grandmother. I barely escaped into the woods, forced to watch from the shadows as Victoria live-streamed the whole thing, screaming, "This is what happens when you oppose progress. This is what happens when you challenge the natural order of our community. Marcus Thompson is a cancer that must be cut out." The mob mentality was terrifying. Dozens of residents cheered her on in the comments. My security cameras captured everything of Victoria orchestrating it all, laughing as they destroyed my family's memories. One of the men, clearly rattled, asked, "Lady, are you sure about this? This is arson." Victoria's icy response was caught on tape. "I'll pay you enough to forget your concerns. Just finish the job." But the physical destruction wasn't the worst part. When Richard came by later, drunk and reckless, he blurted out the dark truth behind Victoria's twisted need for control. "You wanna know why she's like this?" he slurred, leaning heavily against what was left of my porch. "She lost custody of her 3 kids in her first marriage. The judge said she was mentally unfit as she used to make them stand against the wall every morning for posture checks, made them rewrite homework if the margins were off by a millimeter. One of them still in therapy." He paused, then continued, "She can't control her kids, so she controls this whole damn place." After he left, I found a letter that must have fallen from Victoria's purse during the attack. It was from her eldest daughter. "Mom, I can't see you anymore while you're still like this. You need help. Please don't contact me or my siblings. We're scared of you. Remember when you made me rewrite my essay 17 times because the margins were off by a millimeter? I still have nightmares about disappointing you. Please get help." The heartbreak in those words was unmistakable, but no amount of personal pain excused what Victoria had done to our community. Standing in the wreckage of my grandfather's cabin, staring at the ashes of his handmade chair, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about defending my property anymore, it was about protecting an entire community from a dangerous, unstable woman who was abusing her power to hurt innocent people. "Enough," I said to the empty room. "This isn't just about a cabin. It's about stopping a monster." I called Elena right away. "Go through every single document in the box Harold gave me," I told her. "I know my grandfather left me more than just this property. He left me the tools to fight back." Elena worked through the night, and what she found changed everything. Buried in the original lease agreements were clauses I hadn't even known existed. If the leaseholder committed criminal acts or harassed the landowner, the lease could be terminated immediately and no need to wait until 2028. The land, and everything on it, would revert to me right away. My grandfather had even documented past harassment attempts from the 1970s and 80s, all notarized and legally binding. But Victoria wasn't done. The next day, she switched tactics. She showed up at my temporary hotel room with Richard and 2 lawyers, carrying a briefcase stuffed with papers. "Marcus," she said, her voice dripping with fake charm, "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Let's make a deal. Sign the cabin land over to the HOA, and we'll drop all lawsuits and walk away. We'll even give you $50,000 for your trouble." When I refused, her pleasant mask slipped away. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," she hissed. "I have connections everywhere. Your restaurants will fail. Your loans will be called in. Your life will be a living hell. I've destroyed bigger men than you." She didn't know that Emma, still playing double agent, had recorded the whole conversation from the hallway. As Victoria stormed out, she turned back one last time. "That cabin will be gone by the end of the week," she sneered. "Whether you're in it or not is up to you." 5 minutes later, Elena called, her voice crackling with excitement. "Marcus, you won't believe this. You don't just own Pine Ridge. Sterling Heights itself was built on your grandfather's lease land. Every single house including Victoria's mansion is sitting on property you control. And with everything they've done, you can take it all back, right now." The tension reached its breaking point when Richard, using his connections, convinced his golf buddy, Judge Davidson, to issue an arrest warrant for me, accusing me of terrorizing poor, innocent Victoria. 200 Sterling Heights residents rallied in front of my ruined cabin, Victoria at the head of the mob. She held up a massive banner that read, "Evict the squatter." and shouted through a megaphone, "This man is a threat to our way of life. He's trying to destroy everything we've built. Look at him living in filth, jealous of our success." The crowd was a mix of true believers and those too scared not to show up. Elena and Harold urged me not to turn myself in. "Trust me," Elena said, her voice steady. "What's about to happen will change everything. I've been in touch with some powerful people who've been watching Victoria for a long time." Emma sent me a panicked text from inside Victoria's house. "She's lost it completely. She's talking about permanent solutions to the Marcus problem. She just withdrew $50,000 in cash. Be careful." I knew then that this had crossed from a property dispute into something truly dangerous. Victoria's need for control had it twisted into something far darker. I considered running, but Elena insisted we were close to the end. "Just a few more hours," she promised. "The pieces are all in place." She's about to face the consequences of committing federal crimes. By this point, Victoria had completely lost touch with reality. She rented a massive excavator and drove it up to my cabin herself. "If the law won't help," she screamed to the crowd, "I'll restore order with my own hands." She was live streaming to over 100,000 viewers, many of them cheering her on. "Watch me eliminate this eyesore and protect our community values." The crowd parted as the excavator rumbled forward. I stood in front of the cabin and no weapons, just my own body to protect it. Victoria was at the controls, her face twisted with rage. "Move or be crushed," she screamed over the roar of the engine. "I'm done playing games. You have 5 seconds." The tension was unbearable. The crowd held its breath as the excavator's bucket rose high in the air, poised to crash down on me and the cabin. Some in the crowd began shouting for her to stop, while others urged her on. 3, 2, that's when the wail of sirens cut through the chaos. But these weren't local police. A convoy of black SUVs roared up the dirt road, and FBI agents poured out, weapons drawn. Elena jumped out of the lead vehicle with federal marshals and boxes of documents in tow. Agent Monroe, the lead FBI investigator, used a loudspeaker to cut through the madness. "Victoria Sterling, shut off that machine immediately. This is the FBI. You are under federal investigation." The crowd gasped and stumbled back, suddenly realizing they were about to become accomplices to attempted murder. Agent Monroe turned to me, his voice ringing across the valley. "Mr. Thompson, according to the documents we've just confirmed with the Federal Land Registry, you are the legal owner of 15,000 acres of Pine Ridge Valley, including all the land that Sterling Heights is built on. The 99-year lease expires in 18 months, and when it does, all structures on this land revert to you unless a new agreement is reached." The silence was deafening. 200 jaws dropped at once. Victoria's face went from purple with rage to ghostly pale. "No!" she shrieked. "Call CNN. Call the president. This is fake news," Richard shouted, trying to run. But the FBI agents blocked him instantly. In the crowd, someone fainted while another person began to cry. The reality of what this meant was finally sinking in. They had been paying HOA fees to criminals who didn't even own the land. Emma stepped forward, holding a thick folder. "I reported the HOA's financial crimes to the FBI 3 months ago," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "They've been building a case ever since." She turned to Victoria, her expression a mix of pity and contempt. "You destroyed my life and forced my daughter to go without, all so you could steal from us. But you made one mistake. You trusted me with your passwords." Agent Monroe approached Victoria, who was still frozen in the excavator. "Mrs. Sterling," he said evenly, "you're under arrest for embezzlement, aggravated assault, and attempted murder. This excavator and your live stream are clear evidence of your intent to harm Mr. Thompson." They pulled her from the machine. My legs shook with adrenaline as I stood, facing the crowd that had come to protest against me. I said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're all standing on my land." The weight of those words hit them like a tidal wave. Someone shouted, "What does this mean for our homes?" Another cried out, "We've been paying criminals." The scene was descending into chaos when Elena stepped forward with a portable microphone. "Please listen," she said firmly. "Mr. Thompson is the rightful owner of this land, but he's not your enemy. Victoria and Richard Sterling have stolen $8 million from you, raising your fees and threatening anyone who dared to ask questions. Mr. Thompson is a victim just like you. She held up a stack of documents. These are the original lease agreements. Your homes are safe for the next 18 months, and Mr. Thompson has already indicated that he's willing to negotiate new, fair terms. But first, we need to deal with the criminals who have been stealing from you. Victoria wasn't done. As FBI agents cuffed her, she began to laugh a maniacal, wild sound. "You idiots don't understand," she shrieked. "I already sold the development rights 3 days ago. I signed a deal with Wellington Development Corporation and they're going to bulldoze everything and build a mega mall. The contracts are ironclad. You can't stop it." The crowd gasped. Richard went pale. Victoria Brokenbar, tell me you didn't. You can't sell rights to land we don't own. That's federal fraud. Victoria's lawyer, who'd been watching nervously from the sidelines, immediately stepped back. "I had no knowledge of this. I'm withdrawing as her counsel, effective immediately." Agent Monroe's expression turned grim. "Mrs. Sterling, you just confessed to federal fraud in front of 200 witnesses and on live stream. Thank you for making our job easier." As they led her away, Victoria kept screaming, "Check your email, Marcus. The truth is in your email." But I was too exhausted to care. I had won, but I knew the real work was just beginning. The next day, in a packed community center, the full scope of my ownership was revealed to 2,500 stunned residents. Federal judges had reviewed and confirmed every document. I legally own 15,000 acres of Pine Ridge Valley, land worth $4 billion, with $6 billion worth of homes sitting on it. Victoria and Richard Sterling's $5 million mansion where they had schemed for years sat on my land too. The original lease terms were crystal clear. When the lease expired, not only would the land revert to me, but every structure on it would as well, unless new agreements were reached. A federal prosecutor explained that my great-grandfather had bought the land in 1928 from the state of Colorado to preserve it, creating the 99-year lease system to balance development and conservation while retaining the right to reclaim the land if it was misused. The room erupted into panic, people crying, shouting, frantically calling lawyers. I waited until the noise died down. Then I raised my hand and spoke, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "Let me be very clear," I said. "Those of you who were victims of Victoria Sterling have nothing to fear. I'm not here to take your homes or destroy your lives. But those who actively participated in her campaign to harass and threaten me, that's a different story." I looked directly at the 47 people who had signed the petition to ban me, who had participated in the vandalism, who had cheered as Victoria tried to crush me with that excavator. They knew who they were and they squirmed in their seats. "For the 1,953 innocent residents, your lease rates will remain the same. I'll offer you new, fair 50-year leases. You've suffered enough under the Sterling regime. But for the 47 who supported Victoria's crimes, you have two choices. 1. Accept a 400% increase in your lease rate. If you're paying $500 now, you'll pay $2,000. Or 2. Vacate the property within 30 days. I turned to Victoria, sitting there in custody. Her designer suit rumpled, her hair a mess. "And you, Victoria Sterling, your mansion will be demolished, brick by brick. The land will be returned to nature." Victoria completely snapped. With a surge of strength, she broke free from the FBI agent's grip and pulled a knife from her designer purse. "I am the queen here," she screamed, lunging at me. "I control everything. This is my kingdom." 3 agents tackled her before she could take 2 steps. As they pinned her to the ground, she kept shrieking, "You don't understand. I sold the rights to Wellington Development. They're going to bulldoze everything and build a mega mall. I signed the papers." Victoria screamed, "It's irreversible. Marcus Thompson will own nothing." Richard's face went pale as he realized the legal implications. "Victoria Brokenbar, you can't sell rights to land we don't own. That's fraud, a federal fraud on top of everything else." He turned to the FBI agents, his voice shaking. "I'll tell you everything. Every crime she committed, everyone she blackmailed, every dollar she stole. Just please see Brokenbar, I had nothing to do with the Wellington deal. That was all her. She forged my signature, but I wasn't interested in Richard's cowardly attempt to save himself." Too late. Richard, I said coldly. The FBI already has everything, including security footage of you helping to plan the attack on my cabin. I turned back to the crowd where Emma Brooks stood with her daughter, Sophie. The little girl looked terrified, clinging to her mother's hand. I want to publicly thank Emma Brooks, the real hero of Pine Ridge, I said, my voice loud and clear. She risked everything to expose the truth. She could have stayed silent. She could have protected herself, but she chose to do what was right. The applause started slowly but grew into a standing ovation. Emma was crying as I continued. Emma, would you please come up here? The crowd parted as Emma walked forward, tears streaming down her face. Sophie hugged her tightly. You did the right thing, Mom, the little girl said loud enough for everyone to hear. Just like you always taught me. You're a hero. I turned to the crowd. Emma will be the new community manager for Pine Ridge, with a salary of $100,000 a year and full benefits. She'll coordinate the transition and make sure everyone is treated fairly. No more stolen funds. No more crazy rules about grass high. No more fear. The 47 people who had supported Victoria looked sick. One of them, a man named Bradley who had vandalized my cabin, stood up. This isn't fair, he shouted. We were just following HOA rules. We didn't know she was a criminal. I met his gaze, unwavering. You cheered while someone tried to kill me with an excavator. You spray-painted death threats on my grandfather's cabin. You have 30 days to leave or pay 4 times your current lease rates. Your choice. Another supporter, Mrs. Davidson, started to cry. Where will we go? She sobbed. This is our home. Elena stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. You participated in attempted murder. Be grateful Mr. Thompson isn't pressing individual charges. As the meeting ended, Victoria was being taken away by EMTs for a psychiatric evaluation. Even strapped to a gurney, she kept screaming, I'll be back. Pine Ridge is mine. Check your email. Marcusa, check your email. The Wellington deal is real. My phone buzzed with a notification, an email from an unknown sender. Subject line, the real owner of Pine Ridge. Emma leaned over my shoulder. Open it, she urged. Whatever trick she's trying, we need to know. I clicked it open. My blood ran cold as I read the header. Oh my God, Elena whispered, reading over my shoulder. The document was a deed transfer dated 1928, 1 year before the lease was signed. It suggested that my grandfather might not have been the original purchaser of Pine Ridge. My fear turned to relief and then to awe as I read further. The document showed that my great-grandfather, Thomas Thompson, had purchased the land from the state of Colorado for preservation purposes. It included a clause requiring the land be used for the benefit of the community and the preservation of Colorado's natural beauty. My grandfather had inherited it and created the lease system to balance controlled growth and conservation. The email had been sent by Victoria's lawyer, a last, desperate bluff, but it had backfired, providing even more proof of my family's ownership and conservation vision. Nice try, Victoria, I muttered. The Wellington deal was a fraud. You can't sell what you don't own, and Wellington's lawyers were probably already preparing lawsuits against her. I stood up and faced the crowd. The Sterling reign of terror is officially over, I said, and I want you all to see something. I pulled up the live stream Victoria had been recording when she tried to kill me. Over 150,000 people were watching the aftermath. This is what happens when HOA power goes unchecked, I said, my voice calm but resolute. This is what happens when we let bullies run our communities. But this is also what happens when good people like Emma Brooks stand up for what's right. The crowd erupted in applause again. Harold Crawford stood up, his elderly voice strong and clear. I've lived here 40 years, he said, and I've never seen justice served so completely. Marcus Thompson isn't just a landowner. No, Harold said, his voice strong and resolute. Marcus Thompson is a hero. He saved us from a tyrant. As the crowd began to leave, many came up to shake my hand, apologize for believing Victoria's lies, and thank me for being fair. The 47 who had supported Victoria slunk away quietly, already making plans to leave. Pine Ridge was about to start a new chapter, and it would be nothing like Victoria Sterling's kingdom of fear. Victoria's downfall was swift and brutal. Her trial captured national attention, and she was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for embezzlement, assault, and attempted murder. The judge called her a clear danger to society who had abused her power to terrorize an entire community. Her assets were seized to pay restitution to the residents she had robbed. But perhaps her most painful punishment came when the court ordered her to record a public apology video that would be posted online. In an orange jumpsuit, her once perfect hair now graying at the roots, Victoria had to look straight into the camera and admit she had stolen $8 million while terrorizing innocent families. The video racked up 500,000 views in a single day, with comments ranging from "justice served" to "this is what happens when Karens go too far." Richard Sterling tried to cut a deal by testifying against his wife, but the FBI already had enough evidence to convict him. He was sentenced to 5 years for his role in the embezzlement scheme. The saddest part was when Victoria's children were asked if they wanted to visit her in prison. All three declined, with her eldest daughter releasing a statement. "Our mother chose control and power over love and family. We hope she gets the help she needs, but we cannot have her in our lives." Victoria had lost everything: her freedom, her wealth, her power, and most painfully, her family, all because she couldn't stand the sight of my simple cabin and thought she could bully me into submission. Meanwhile, I established the Thomas Thompson Memorial Trust, named after my grandfather, to protect Pine Ridge Valley forever. 10,000 acres were designated as a permanent nature preserve, safe from any future development. The remaining 5,000 acres would be carefully managed for sustainable, affordable housing. I also reduced lease rates by 40% for everyone who had been a victim of Victoria's schemes, with the savings going toward conservation efforts and scholarships for local kids. But perhaps most importantly, I created the National HOA Abuse Victims Fund to help people across the country who were being terrorized by power-hungry board members like Victoria. One sunny afternoon, Emma brought Sophie to visit the rebuilt cabin. As we sat on the new porch built with the help of my contractor friends, I explained to Sophie why this land was so important. "You see," I said to the bright-eyed 10-year-old, "land isn't just property or money, it's a legacy, a gift we leave for our children and grandchildren. Your mom protected this community from someone who forgot that." Sophie nodded thoughtfully and asked, "Is that why Mom stood up to Mrs. Sterling? To protect our home?" Emma hugged her daughter tightly and smiled. "Exactly, sweetheart. Sometimes doing the right thing is scary, but it's always worth it." I couldn't help but think how proud my grandfather would have been his land being used to teach the next generation about responsibility and courage. In the weeks that followed, Emma poured her energy into rebuilding Pine Ridge. She started a community garden where the Johnsons, who had nearly lost their home to Victoria's outrageous fees, now grew vegetables to sell at local farmers markets. The Patel twins, who had been forced to leave college, received full scholarships from our new education fund. Emma even created a children's playground where Victoria's gaudy HOA office had once stood. As for the 47 who had supported Victoria, their stories were varied. Bradley, who had vandalized my cabin, came to apologize before leaving, admitting he had been terrified of becoming Victoria's next target. Others left bitter and unrepentant. The day we demolished Victoria's mansion was turned into a community event. Everyone took turns with the sledgehammer, symbolically destroying the tyranny that had ruled their lives for so long. We saved one brick from Victoria's mansion and mounted it with a plaque, "Never Again." 3 months later, we hosted the first annual Pine Ridge Victory Day barbecue. Over 3,000 people came, including some who had once protested against me. The atmosphere was festive. Children played, local bands performed, and the air was filled with the smell of grilled food. Harold Crawford raised a toast to Marcus Thompson, who turned a small cabin into a symbol of justice, and to Emma Brooks, who risked everything to save her community. The crowd erupted in cheers. We even held a tongue-in-cheek Karen contest, where residents competed to do their best Victoria Sterling impression. A grandmother won by measuring grass with a ruler while shrieking about property values. Everyone laughed, turning our shared trauma into a source of healing. But the transformation went beyond jokes and barbecues. Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd once been fined $500 for her garden gnome, now ran a thriving decorating committee and no restrictions. Sophia Brooks finally joined her science club and took first place at the state fair with a project on sustainable land management, Inspired by our conservation efforts, Harold Crawford began writing a book about the whole scandal, with all proceeds going to the Victims Fund. The story drew national attention. The HOA reform groups held up Pine Ridge as a cautionary tale. I received letters from victims of HOA abuse across the country, thanking me for standing up to tyranny. One letter, in particular, moved me. It was from an elderly veteran in Texas who'd been harassed by his HOA for flying an American flag. "You gave me hope," he wrote. "Bullies don't always win." The new HOA board, led by Emma, created what became known as the Thompson Rule, as a set of common-sense guidelines to prevent future abuse. They even gave me a laminated VIP card as a joke. Marcus Thompson authorized to do whatever he wants in Pine Ridge, valid forever. Someone put up a new sign at the entrance to the development. "Welcome to Pine Ridge, where Karns learned their lesson." My favorite addition was the bronze plaque at the entrance to the newly named Thomas Thompson Conservation Area, protecting Colorado's natural beauty from those who would exploit it. As the sun set on Victory Day, I stood on my cabin porch looking out over the valley my grandfather had protected with such foresight. The cabin that Victoria Sterling had tried so hard to destroy still stood proud and free, a testament to the power of standing up to bullies. "Grandpa," I whispered to the evening breeze, "I didn't just save the cabin, I saved your vision for this place." In the distance, I could see families walking the new nature trails, children playing in the community garden Emma had started, and neighbors actually talking to each other instead of filing complaints. Pine Ridge had transformed from a place of fear and control into a true community. And that's how one HOA Karen called the cops on my cabina without realizing I owned the entire $4 billion valley she lived in. From 3 police cars responding to her absurd call to a public apology video viewed by 500,000 people, Victoria Sterling learned the hardest lesson of her life. Never call the cops when you're standing on someone else's land. Today, Pine Ridge is the Thomas Thompson Conservation Area, and my cabin still stands very peaceful, free, and guarded by a simple wooden sign, "Karens keep out." The 47 people who once supported Victoria either paid the new lease rates or moved away, and the community thrived without their toxic presence. If you have your own crazy HOA story, drop it in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the person you're trying to destroy might just own the ground beneath your feet. Thanks for listening to my story. And remember, always check the land records before you start a war with your neighbor. You made it through, so you deserve a medal or at least another Ya Stories episode. Hit that next video and let's keep the madness going.